Could we set up a virtual coffee? There's something I want to talk to you about. That is in 2025, that is your CV submission. Having the virtual coffee, meeting them in person for a coffee, that in 2025 is your first round interview.
Warren, you've been recruiting CTOs for over 20 years by the looks of it. And you've recently posted on LinkedIn about how you're willing to help people who are serious about their careers, who are perhaps struggling in the current market, find a role. And you described that you had a 5-step process. And you very kindly offered to come on today and talk about it. So have I got that right on who you help? And if so, can you talk us through the process?
John, it's great to be here. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, I'd be delighted to share this with your listeners. I think it's fair for me to give a bit of background as to how this 5-step process came about, what's driven it, if you like. And yes, I've been doing this now for nearly 30 years. And I've seen the job industry, how they conduct themselves in terms of helping tech leaders, anybody find their next job. And in the past, the traditional route to market, and I describe the traditional route as simply, here's a resume or CV. Let's tailor it, shorten it, do whatever you want to do with it. There's plenty of people that have different opinions on what you should do with your CV and resume. Once you've done that, let's apply for a job online, LinkedIn, Indeed. The caveat to all that is that very rarely do I hear about jobs that tick all the boxes. They tick some of the boxes. And then firing off that CV or resume literally into the ether. And sadly, most of the time, never to be heard of again. That awful phrase of ghosting comes to mind all too often. A lot of jobs, and I'm going to give my industry the benefit of the doubt, but there's so many jobs out there that don't exist. Some of them are fictitious. Some of them are simply jobs that are advertised that have been filled and they haven't been taken down. There's the added frustration now that we've got with AI, and we could do a podcast on its own on this subject, but the CV screening AI bots are certainly at the level that I tend to focus on, which is senior tech leaders and CTOs and CIOs, is not fit for purpose. And I've got examples of that as well. So you've got all these things happening. And then, and I'll give you a real world example, John, if I may. If we were having this conversation a couple of years ago, and I had a client come to me who wanted a serious CTO. And when I say serious, I mean not a lead full stack web developer with a CTO badge, somebody whose primary focuses are strategic and leadership of and growing a team. If we had this conversation 2 years ago and a client retained me, during the campaign, we would advertise the job anyway. Although we never rely on adverts, we would still run it more of a branding exercise. During that period of time, typically we would get 30 to 50 people apply for the role. And we throw good old Pareto in there. 80% sadly wouldn't be right, but 20% would certainly be worth a conversation. Now, if I had a job like that today, retained search assignment, and we advertised it again, that figure of 30 to 50 would very quickly become 1,000. And the same Pareto 80-20 would apply. 80% of those individuals wouldn't be particularly relevant, but 20% may be worth a conversation. Now, that's with a recruiter. Imagine with an end client, you can probably, that 1,000 is going to be more like a 1,500 or maybe 2,000. So I think genuine senior tech leaders are swimming against the tide now. And I've seen this develop probably before COVID, I was getting really frustrated seeing these things happen. And during and since COVID, I've had lots of conversations with individuals who I would describe as very, very talented tech leaders who may have graduated in the 80s with a software engineering degree or a computer science degree, and quite simply went from one job, finishing a job on a Friday and starting a new job on a Monday. A lot of the time, never even having formal interviews. They found the next roles, they were headhunted, and have found themselves between jobs through no fault of their own. And there's an anomaly at the moment of individuals like this who are really struggling, both in terms of can't find a job, but also mentally as well. And I have a lot of conversations with individuals who are frankly really worried. They're senior, at a similar age to myself, and something needs to be done. There needs to be a different way of being able to find your next role without doing the de facto. It's a bit harsh, but I describe it as the CV, resume, job advert, hamster wheel.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's broken, John.
And as you say, if it doesn't matter how good your CV is, if you're sending out and there's 1,000 other applications, somebody's only going to be able to screen so many of those in whatever time they've got.
Yep.
And whatever process they've got, whatever order, they're going to go through and find maybe 10 that are good enough to interview, and then stop there because they just haven't got the bandwidth to go through it.
No, and sadly, that then is an ideal, perfect storm to come in and drop into the process something like an AI screening, CV screening bot. And without being technical, because I'm not, but these things can't read between the lines. They can't see the real value that somebody with 20, 25, 30 years of experience can provide for a business. They're given a list of criteria, and if somebody hasn't got those exact words or slight, fuzzy logic phrases on their CV, they get excluded. And I'll give you one quick example. This is a genuine thing, and it's more than once it's happened to me. But a CTO of a very well-known household name within the insurance industry was hiring at VP level, and an individual who knew the CTO really well applied for the job, didn't realize the CTO was actually the CTO of where he'd applied for, got a rejection, and was shocked because his CV was made for the role, in his opinion. Found out that his friend was working there, contacted them and said, look, I've applied and been rejected. Okay, send us your CV to me. And the CTO agreed that this individual had, if they'd have created a job spec based on a CV, that's what the job spec would have looked like. The long and the short of it is the individual got the gig, got the role as a VP of engineering, but had to bypass the AI bot. And if he'd have just accepted it, that would have been one he can cross out from his list. So it's happening more and more often, John. It's not good.
And I think the flip side of that is that more and more people, more and more candidates are using AI to tailor their CV.
Oh yes. Yeah,
so if you're honest with your CV, as we'll set aside what people claim about how honest people are on the CVs, but if you're genuinely honest with your CV and you haven't tailored it extremely for that job, versus somebody that has with AI, there are people using tools to hit 1,000 jobs with 1,000 tailored CVs, all done with AI. They've never seen what the CV looks like. You're going to really struggle to stand out against that.
Absolutely.
And I've heard some people from hiring managers saying that they are getting people who have a near perfect CV, but when they interview them, the person doesn't match the CV and the person doesn't have the skills they want. So, let's say that 10 CVs are getting through to the top, the hiring manager invested the time in interviewing them on the interview panels and whatever, and they're finding none of those candidates is suitable. So we kind of have that perfect storm of people saying, I can't hire anyone. There's no good candidates out there. And maybe the good, honest candidates being drowned out by people who are providing highly tailored CVs that perhaps don't match what they can really offer.
Very frustrating. And it happens a lot. It really does. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
So I think, and I haven't heard your process yet, that you've hinted at one topic there in networking. That network is so important. If you can speak to a human and cut this out,
Yeah,
speak directly to a hiring manager, that seems incredibly valuable. Is that part of your 5-step process?
absolutely. In fact, I'm going to throw a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons now, in that the process that I've created and nurtured over the last 8 to 10 years doesn't lead with a CV or a resume. It's there as a necessary part of the process, but it's not what's led with. And I think it's probably now's a good segue just to move into a bit more about the process, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So the industry that I'm in, recruitment, went through a change about 12 years ago, and I sat in a room with the good and the great of my industry, and we were being trained, or a lecture, should we say, from a guy from Google. And he was explaining to us how our job roles were going to change. Where we're no longer recruiters, we're marketeers. And I guffawed at him. I made a little comment about it. And within 6 months of that training, I realized he was right.
Okay.
And that, if you like, mindset shift that I've had, I then slowly began to realize that not only is it a mindset shift for me in the job that I do, it's also a mindset shift and should be applied for how candidates go about their career journey, go about taking control of their career journey, not relying on their CV or resume, not going through this hamster wheel, not having to go through the pain of being ghosted and feeling rejected. And I, over a period of time, I've come up with a 5-step process that addresses how somebody can become, if you like, the captain of their own ship when it comes to their career. And it's as equally effective if you're between jobs, or in fact, probably marginally more powerful if you're in a job as well. Now, whether it's psychology or not, I don't know, but it's a lot easier to find a new role when you're in a role than it is than when you're between a role. So that, I guess that's kind of the background to it, why I came up with it and how I've nurtured it over time. So with your blessing, I'm going to jump into this into these 5 steps in order, and hopefully give enough in this podcast for somebody to actually grab the bull by the horn, and actually do it and deliver on it. So if there's anything that isn't clear, please jump fire away, and I'll try and give as much clarity as I can. So the 5 steps. Now, the first 2 steps I align to the fixed costs that you would get on a business plan, salary, rent, or whatever. These are things that are vital for the process, but they're things that don't need to be changed that often, and you don't need to give it that much of attention. But it's key that they're done correctly, and because they're effectively 2 questions that need to be answered, that they're not just flippantly answered, they're given consideration. It can be quite a cathartic process, these first two stages. And the first stage is simply this. It's the answer to this question, which is, what value will you bring to your next employer? Now, if I ask somebody that question, I have to raise a caveat straight away. And that caveat is simply, I don't want to know the answer. I want you to go away and think of it. But if I don't get in quick enough, and I'm going to give an extreme now to prove a point, the answers can be, well, I've been at my current role for 10 years. The founders really like me. I've never had a day off sick. I've got certificates on the wall. These are values that I guess are expected. They are a given, if you like. The values that I'm looking for are the outcomes of what it is that you or your team deliver that can be measured in a tangible way, ideally in a currency, but if not, in an impact on EBITDA, in a improvement in efficiency, or uh, reduction in downtimes, however you can measure it. Now's the time to sit back and decide what it is, excuse me, that my team and I do, at the outcome of what we do. So, by way of example, and again, this is a real world example of somebody that has been through this process, and I'm paraphrasing slightly. The outcome of the conversations that we had eventually came to this. I'm a technical CTO who can create from scratch a product-led SaaS offering that has generated 10 million ARR from a standing start within 18 months. I'm sure you can come up with better examples, John, but hopefully that gives an idea. We need tangible outcomes of what it is that you and your team do, what you're responsible for. That's question one. That's the first phase, okay? And the second phase runs very closely to it, but it's important that you can demonstrate where you've done that, okay? So I would typically give somebody what we call a fact find document that will extract this information, will help people get that, if you like, getting into the right thinking, all right? And the answers to those two questions, this is very much a sort of an Americanism now, but it essentially creates your elevator pitch. And if you literally got into an elevator or a lift and someone said, what do you do? If you can deliver the answer to 1 and 2 succinctly to the person in the lift, the idea is they'll miss their floor and want to come with you all the way to the top, rather than look at their watch and get out two floors before they should have done because you're boring them. But it's about thinking about outcome, and being very tangible with that outcome, because ultimately the types of individuals that are going to be interested in what it is that you do, and this key acronym of ROI, are really only bothered about what you're going to deliver. And of course, there are other things that they care about. But ultimately, if you're coming to the table as a solution, you need to consider yourself, as I said, it's a marketing project, that the answers to 1 and 2, your elevator pitch, this would be the strapline on your webpage above the fold. This is what you're about. This is what you've got to live and breathe. This is what you do. Okay? And sometimes trying to get 30 years of experience into that phrase, that sentence, isn't easy. All right. And I sometimes encourage people that, they do lots and lots of roles and responsibilities, particularly as a CTO, but they don't enjoy everything that they do. I said, well, now's the time to not include that. If you don't want to do that in your next role, focus on what you enjoy doing. As long as you can give a tangible outcome, ideally in a currency, but if not, in the impact that it has, the improvements that it has, time, percentage, but ideally in that money thing. So that's 1 and 2. Okay.
Okay, so if I can recap that then, Warren. Yeah, it's exactly as that chap from Google said, it's the marketing. It's a classic consultant's marketing pitch.
Yes.
Hi, I'm John. I do X for companies that Y. For example, I worked with Z and this was the outcome. And that's that classic elevator pitch that you get in the elevator of Richard Branson and you pitch him for why I should work with your consultancy because of that. Okay, cool. And the second part is, as you say, really demonstrating where you've done that with a concrete example.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if I could add something there then, I think a lot of us, and I've been in this industry for pushing 30 years now. You're right, I can point to having worked in embedded software, in web software, in AI, in SCADA systems. You can't boil that down to one. So I think it might be useful for a lot of people to think, well, pick out 3 or 4 of these, and again, that areas that you say you like. Have 3 or 4 already that you've tailored, that you've got the concrete examples that you want to do.
Yep.
And then tailor that CV or tailor whatever the next step is and use the one that's most appropriate to
Absolutely.
that
I mean,
role.
I would go a bit further than that. Not only about the CV, and it comes on to point 3, is that if you have 2, 3, 4 very distinct outcomes that you've got and you actively use within your CTO Swiss Army knife of skills, then have more than one. I try to keep it as simplistic as I can by saying this is the one that you need to go for. But if you've got a background that's, that's relevant now, and I think, and I may be being a little bit harsh here, but I would probably say everything that's longer than 10 years ago in your CV should only be limited to a couple of lines unless it's relevant to what you're doing now and what you're doing now in terms of what you're looking for now as well. This isn't reinventing the wheel at all. This is, solution sales 101, but
Yeah.
you've got to understand at the outset and treat. I'm a very much a people person, but for this exercise, you've got to look at yourself as a commodity and as an outcome and as a business focused outcome as well. So that's the first 2 phases and first 2 steps. So moving on to the next step, and so the third element here. So I'm going to give a little bit of pretext again to this as well. This is something that I say to everybody that I coach, however impactful they've been in their career to date and however well known they are, is that, and I'll quote the day, so today, 21st of August 2025, that today, Mr. or Mrs. CTO, you have to consider that you are the best kept secret in your sector. And if this is going out to the States, in your niche or your niche, okay? And we need to reverse that. So today we're going to draw a line in the sand and we're going to go on a journey from being the best kept secret, and the goal and the destination of that journey, however far in the future it's going to be, is for you to become a recognized authority, a recognized minor celebrity, if you like, an expert in your chosen field of expertise. And it's a journey that is probably, this part of the process is what gets ignored the most. But for me, it's absolutely pivotal to get this right. I'm going to start to be specific now about a product that some people raise an eyebrow to. And I'm not always the biggest fan of Microsoft, but what they've done with LinkedIn is pretty amazing in terms of a marketing product. And phase 3 is about becoming known. It's about being found by the right people. So LinkedIn as a platform, and if we were having this conversation when I first got involved in B2B sales back in the 80s, for me to network would mean going out to the pub and learning how to hold my liquor for 2 hours to have a business conversation with somebody, or going for lunch, or going to a sporting event, or going to a conference. You can do all of that networking and more now from your laptop, from your desktop, from your smartphone. It can all be done there. Okay. So never before in the history of mankind has it been easier to become known, all right, and not to be that best kept secret. So LinkedIn have probably got, I think last year they went over the billion users, but let's say they've got a billion users. And if I was going to transpose those billion users onto a calendar, the individuals that you should be concerned about, and I'm directing this to anybody who's watching this and thinking about outcomes now, you should only be concerned about the last hour or two of New Year's Eve. Everything else is noise, all right? It's the people that populate those last few minutes, hour of New Year's Eve. And you now need to decide who, in terms of clients who are going to be best to get most value from the answers of 1 and 2. Now, this is the answer to this question, which is effectively finding out who your ideal client profiles are, or creating your avatar in marketing speak. But it's down to you now to, and I do this on a blank sheet of paper, to decide the types of companies that you think are going to get the most from the answers to 1 and 2. And you need to be creative here. And you can discuss or decide that the types of companies that are going to get best value from me are going to be based in the UK, and they're likely to be based in London, and they're probably going to have a head count up to 200 people, and they're probably going to be no more than 10 years old, and they may have had recent funding, and they're going to be in a particular sector. All of these different parameters you can put into LinkedIn, and you don't need to have a premium version of LinkedIn. If you have, and you've got something like Sales Navigator, great. But if you haven't, you can use LinkedIn's standalone product. And you can tell LinkedIn, these are the criteria that I want to search on. And they will come up with depending obviously on the criteria, potentially hundreds of businesses. Now, LinkedIn calls those businesses accounts, okay? But it's not the accounts that we want to reach out to. It's the individuals there, the people, and typically at the levels that I tend to, of the people I speak to, the levels of people that are going to be most relevant are going to be CEOs, are going to be founders, are going to be PE firms, are going to be VC firms, are going to be HR directors. These are the individuals at these businesses that you've decided meet the criteria that you feel are going to be able to take most advantage from the answers to questions 1 and 2. And I keep going back to the answers to questions 1 or 2, but it's pivotal that we keep this in mind, okay? And when you start to then drill down on the individuals within the accounts, and LinkedIn calls those individuals leads, you need to start to think like this. You need to start to think that those individuals, and this is quite an extreme thought process, but you have to imagine that those individuals that are now presented to you on a list, on a screen that you've just created as a search, all of those individuals are struggling to get a good night's sleep. And the reason they can't get a good night's sleep is that something's happening in their business, whether it's enormous chaos, and the answers to 1 and 2 will bring order to that chaos, or whether there's a massive block, and the answers to 1 or 2 will get rid of that block in their business. Whatever it may be, you've got to think to yourself and believe that these individuals are all going through an enormous amount of pain, can't get a good night's sleep, and you're the answer to their problems. And unfortunately, at the moment, they don't know who you are. They have no idea who you are. So you've identified now potentially your ideal client profiles, these leads, these individuals. But it's all very well and good having them on a screen in front of you. Your network, if there is a magic to this, and there isn't, or a secret sauce or some magic beans, but it lies, and it will be found within your network. Now, LinkedIn aren't naive. They don't want the network being spammed, shall we say, excessively. So you are limited to how much activity you can do on a daily basis. So step 3 is every day invite up to 25 of these leads into your network. These are individuals that are relevant to you and to the outcome that you deliver on. And okay, you may, if it was me sending out an invite as a recruiter, I would probably get a 10% acceptance rate if I'm lucky. But someone like your good self, John, a recognized CTO, that figure's probably going to be closer to 80%. People will want to know, will want you in their network, and that's what you're going to find. Is as you start to reach out to these individuals on a daily basis, growing your network with the right people. Now, networks are things that everybody has. Okay, and I know that if I needed to tap into my network and I didn't nurture it in any way, and I was going back to 25, 30 years, well, a good proportion of that network are retired now. And there's also an element that, aren't with us anymore as well. And if you don't start today, there's an old, I'm sure it's a Chinese proverb about when's the best time to
Yep.
grow a tree.
Indeed.
So the second best time is today. And you need to start bringing the right relevant people into your network because you've got a message to share. But at the moment, no one's seeing it, or not enough of the right people are seeing it. And your network, you have to consider it. This is a little bit dramatic, but rather like a delicate flower. And if you don't water it, if you don't put it in the sun and look after it, it will wither away.
Absolutely.
So even if a month after taking action and changing this, how you would traditionally do stuff and applying these rules, you find your great dream job, don't stop every day, carry on, and you can automate it. There are ways of doing that as well. But essentially 20 to 25 people every day. Should you send invites or not? There's not a right or wrong to that. If your profile is clear enough in terms of what it is that you do, I would argue that you don't need to send an invite. But if it's not clear enough, then a short invite, but the real key thing is when you send an invite to somebody to bring them into your network, and this is a phrase that I use, which is hopefully no one's watching this while they're having their breakfast. Do not do a value vomit. Do not splurt out everything that you do. All you're doing here is saying to somebody that they may be a CEO, so it would be, hi, first name, great to connect with business leaders within the whatever the sector is. I share interesting stuff on our industry on a regular basis. Hope you find some of it useful. Thanks for connecting. That is it. You're giving something. You're telling them that you're going to give them something. All right? Don't start telling them about what you do. All right, because that will turn people off. That's if you do send an invite in. So step 3 is your network, is recognizing that you need to become change from being the secret in your industry to being someone that's known, to being a minor celebrity. Now, by doing this, you're not going to be asked for selfies when you go to Tesco's. It's not quite like that. But in those last hours or minutes of New Year's Eve, everything else is noise. Those individuals there will slowly begin to know who you are.
Cool. So do you only recommend doing that on LinkedIn? Or would you also suggest people, if they have the time, look at going on podcasts, look at speaking at conferences, look at some of those old-fashioned networking groups that still do meet face-to-face? Or some of the, if you're around London, there's other tech meetups, for example.
John, that is something that I would probably be mentioning more in the 4th step, but I'm glad you brought it up now, because there is, I don't know if I've used this phrase already now, but forgive me if I'm repeating myself. There is definitely more than one way to skin a cat. If you consider LinkedIn as being your HQ of your project, those other things that you mentioned, going on to podcasts, doing a webinar, going along to face-to-face conferences and industry events, absolutely. And there's a lot of them out there. Joining communities. I'm very lucky. I've got a community that myself that I set up a couple of years ago that's global, that grows, and that's another place that you can grow your reputation with your peers as well. So there's lots of different ways you can be doing it, not just on LinkedIn. If you don't have a website for yourself, johncricketplc.com, or create one, index it. It's not going to be as powerful as LinkedIn or your LinkedIn profile, but it's somewhere else that good headhunters will use as a way of finding where you are if you've got your own website. And if you're working at the moment, it doesn't need to be obvious that you're looking. In fact, I would very much suggest you don't make it obvious that you're looking. But on that website, it could be that you're the CTO of XYZ PLC and say, I'm proudly the CTO of XYZ PLC. I'm a tech leader with 30 years experience. This is what I enjoy doing. Put a bit of personal stuff in there as well, but get your own website up, or even if it's just a landing page, somewhere that's indexed, somewhere that you can put your job titles in, that your outcomes in, that can be found on Google or Bing or any other search engine out there as well. So it's a great point that you make. It isn't just LinkedIn. But I believe LinkedIn should be there, as I said, that HQ, and everything else are the other, if you like, the columns that are keeping the roof up of your project.
Cool. And no one has an excuse not to have a website because domain name is cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You can host your website statically on GitHub, and everybody technical should know how to drive GitHub and
Absolutely.
do that.
Absolutely.
Coming back to LinkedIn, you talked about sending the invites, and in that you mentioned that you might include a note saying, I share content on this.
Yeah.
So it's sort of implied there that you think it's quite important to share content and post on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Am I reading that right?
Correct. Great segue,
Okay.
John.
And how frequently do you think somebody needs to do that then?
Well,
what would you suggest?
If I can now move on to phase 4.
Awesome. Cool.
Of the process. Now, if we were having this conversation 18 months ago, I would be saying, John, your listeners, if they're serious about this, your listeners need to post content every day. But that's changed. About 18 months ago, literally overnight, and I post every day, but I do it all when I'm having my coffee in the morning. All of my LinkedIn daily duties, I get it done before I even sit in front of my desktop. I do it all on my phone. Literally 18 months ago, my daily reach, if you like, the network that were viewing my content and were commenting on it and resharing it went through the floor overnight. And we had a bit of a whinge, my peers, other recruiters. We had a bit of a pity party. What's going on? It wasn't just me; it was all of us. And then I started to speak to the LinkedIn gurus out there. What's going on? There's a couple of really good ones that that come to mind, and they were saying the algorithm's changed. LinkedIn has changed the algorithm, and the crux of it would seem that the multitude of things, an emphasis on paid advertising. They don't want posts going viral. They want to be seen as a social network. They want people having conversations. So the focus on content now is it's still vital. Okay. But quality, which has always been important, very much trumps quantity. But consistency is key. The algorithm will begin to recognize that on a Tuesday and a Thursday, John posts. And at the weekend, he does another post that isn't about business. It tends to be more personal, about him as a person or his hobbies or families and that sort of stuff. And there is a place for that as well. And again, on that subject matter, I've been on LinkedIn since the early 2000s. If I'd have put a post up on LinkedIn about, okay, my oldest son, my grandson was really ill when he was born. Intensive care, came through it, thankfully. So my son ran the marathon to raise money for the pediatric ICU unit that he was in. And I posted on it, got loads of people, yeah, great, and raised a load of money. But if I'd have done that in the thousands, we'd have had what I used to laughingly call the LinkedIn police come out of the woodwork. These weren't anybody who worked for LinkedIn, and they weren't the police. They were other users saying things like, this isn't Facebook, get it off of here. That's changed. There are still people out there that think like that, but LinkedIn doesn't want it to be. LinkedIn wants this to be a social network. They want people to have conversations. They want the people on there, the likes of you and I, to share themselves as much as professionally, maybe even a little bit of vulnerability. But it's key.
I think, Warren, that those people have always been wrong, those LinkedIn police, because And
Excuse me.
I first learned about sales in 2001 when I started my first business, and
Right.
I thought, hell, as a software engineer, I need to suddenly learn how to sell. I can't just be a software engineer running a business. I need to figure out sales and marketing. And one of the things I came across very, very early in that is a statement that people buy people.
Yes.
And I think that's something the LinkedIn police have never understood or don't understand, is that if you want to get another job, it's not just, are you technically qualified?
Mm-hmm.
People are looking rightly and wrongly through A, their biases,
Yes.
and B, do I want to work with this person? And going
Absolutely.
back a few years, do I want to sit next to them every day in the office? Do I want to meet them in the kitchen when I go and get a tea, coffee, or whatever? Because those, we're spending as much time with some of these people as we do with our own families. So
Sometimes
people buy
more.
people. Yeah.
Sometimes more. It's like one of my first jobs in recruitment, I used to describe it like being in the army. I spent more time with these people than I did with my young family as well. And you need to make sure that when you're working alongside somebody, that it's a given that they've got the background, that they can do the stuff that you want. But I find, going back to recruitment, most hires don't work out, not because somebody can't do it or haven't got the skills to do it. It works out because they don't fit in. Okay. And so indirectly, the power behind posting stuff about yourself as an individual and your tone and your cadence comes over, and people will start to see that. If you're a little bit cheeky and you want to, be thorough, joking, great, do it if that's what you like. If you're far more serious, fine, do it. That's what you like. But I would say, if you're going to pin me down and say, well, okay, if you're going to post twice a week, and I would suggest that's the minimum, really. You need to be posting twice a week. And if you want to do something at the weekends that's personal, that's when it should be. But ideally, no more than 30 to 40% of your posts should be personal. The rest should be professional. And every single post, and I'm going to come on to the content of those posts now, but every single post that you do, it should be obvious that there's a common thread running through all of them. And that is knowledge. That is your knowledge and the impact that you have had on businesses in the past. So the best content, in my experience, is simply text, writing scenarios, writing anecdotes, stories, experiences that you've got. And it's the only time I come close to saying an expletive to a tech leader when I'm going through the coaching, when they say, well, I've got no stories people are going to be interested in. BS. You've got loads. Things that have happened that haven't gone well, things that have gone great, software that you've introduced that was the worst thing you've ever done, or the greatest you've ever done. Individuals, how you've turned around, challenges with leadership techniques. There's absolutely loads, and everything that you write on that basis, that might only be, 500 or 600 words, has that thread in it already, saying how knowledgeable you are. Okay, and you're sharing that knowledge twice a week, plus the bit of personal stuff, with a new network of people, of individuals that are putting matchsticks in their eyelids because they can't go to sleep at night because of a problem they've got. And you're sharing experiences about the problems that you've overcome and what you did, maybe with a little bit of a laughing emoji about it, but people can start seeing the value, the answers to 1 and 2 coming out in the content that you share. Now, you mentioned a great point a moment ago about, there's other ways, LinkedIn is the HQ, but all this other stuff, webinars, podcasts. If you're going on a podcast like I am today and you've been invited to go on it, and particularly if you're working, think of the kudos you're creating for your company by going on a podcast. Well, then once that podcast becomes live, share the what's it's out of it everywhere.
Yep.
Little snippets. Don't rely on the person doing the podcast to do the market. As long as they're happy for you to do so, share it everywhere, on your website, on your X account, wherever. Get it out there. There's loads and loads of ways you can create content that isn't confined just to, getting what's the word I'm looking for? A mental block. There's no excuse for it. And there's lots of stuff out there as well, John. There's loads of places that you can go to that will be able to prompt you for content as well. If you go onto YouTube and you type in help writing content on LinkedIn, they'll come up with some great resources. All right. So that's step 4 in the process.
Can I ask a question and
Of course
make
you
an
can.
observation there then? So I love the comment about, going and sharing that if you've been on a podcast and something, and if you've done a talk or anything else like that. And that's great because, again, I'm thinking back to marketing 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, when I learned it. The point there was always go and get yourself in the press, because once you've been featured in the paper, suddenly that brings you credibility.
Yeah.
Somebody else has gone, this person is important, we should listen to them. And it's a bizarre, whether or not you're featured in the Financial Times, or you're featured in the Wiltshire Times, or you're featured in the, West Police and Mendip Boy Scouts News, or whatever something is, it almost has the same effect. It gives you that credibility that somebody else has thought you're worth interviewing. So share it, build on that authority, leverage all of that.
Absolutely.
Coming back to the no stories, and I might be jumping the gun here, in which case my apologies. If you have no stories to tell and better post on LinkedIn, what are you going to do if you get invited to that interview? Because, particularly at senior level, there's going to be that competency-based behavioural interview where they're going to say, tell me about a time when, and then they're going to talk about their pain point.
Yeah.
They're going to talk about their challenges. So if you have no stories for LinkedIn, you really need to address that right now, because you need those stories for your interview process. You need to better, as you say, talk about the pain point, talk about how you solved it, describe the outcome. Maybe you need to talk about the lessons that you learned from it and what you do differently next time.
That's a great point.
I think, it's crucial. I love what you said there about looking on YouTube and some of the other things. And I was just thinking that this will be a great use for AI. Get AI to prompt you. Whether you like going down the pub, or whether you like to go to a coffee shop, or, the classic thing from that TV show, phone a friend, get on a call and just chat. Record it, and you'll probably start talking about stories. I had this happen today, or do you remember that time when? Go back for those, transcribe it. You again use AI to transcribe it and pick your stories out. You'll find you have
fantastic,
absolutely dozens.
This is gold. Genuinely, is my first job in recruitment in the 90s, which was recruiting C++ Sybase analyst programmers for investment banks. What these guys and girls did, way over my head. But we had to try and quantify how good they were. And the technique that we would use a lot of the time was that we would ask somebody a question about a particular technology. And if that person could explain it to you in a way that me, as a recruiter, could understand, then we knew that this person knew their onions. And I think that's very pertinent with what you just said.
Yeah, I used to ask a similar question when I interviewed software engineers.
Right.
Particularly if they were going to be at any level of client-facing, was how would you explain, and then a technology they would know, to your granddad or your grandmother or somebody in your family that's non-technical. It's a great test of communication skills and of how well you understand something.
Absolutely. And I think I love the analogy you gave about aligning that for future interviews. That for me, one of the amber flags I will say to somebody when they're interviewing somebody, that if they can't give minute detail on their achievements, something that they must be proud of doing, and only skirt over it, then there's an element to question the validity of what it is they're telling you. There's always a right time to express yourself in an interview. Okay, but when you've got the right time and being able to verbalize these achievements, chapter and verse, the devil is always in the detail. And if you can then extract that from your head onto content, please, anyone watching this, please never say what I've done is boring, because it's not. It is not. Going back to the last couple of minutes or couple of hours of New Year's Eve, there's people there that will be chomping at the bit to hear your stories. I promise you.
Something else I thought of as you were talking there, you said the minute detail, and you should explain it in in great depth. I increasingly hear people talking about AI co-pilots at interview, where people are coming on and they've got something
Yeah.
either off screen or overlay that's giving them prompts to answer the questions. No AI overlay is ever going to be able to go into that level of detail about what you worked on.
No.
So I think increasingly smart hiring managers are going to ask you for those details, like, what did you
Absolutely.
do? How were you involved? Like, tell me more about this decision. Why did you decide to do X and Y versus Z?
Mm.
And having that detail that you can go into, having those stories, having the ability to explain it, is going to make you stand out versus anyone that's maybe leveraging an AI co-pilot.
Absolutely. What a great, and do
To
you know what? I think I've been thinking on my feet a bit here, John. If you could extract that info, all of that content and stuff into some sort of a glossary and put it together as a sort of a library of all these outcomes, of all these stories that you can refer back to. Fabulous. Well, great.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's great prep. You could use it for tailoring your CV to
Mm.
specific roles when you want one. You could also review that for your interview prep, so you can come along and be very polished in your interviews, ready with your stories. So when somebody says, "Tell me about a time when you
Mm.
solved this problem that we've got," you can talk coherently about it with it being fresh. And everyone, no matter what level you are, can be nervous in an interview. So being prepared takes away a lot of that pain.
Oh, 100%. And imagine being in an interview and you're explaining yourself in detail, and the person interviewing goes, "Hang on, I think I saw the post you wrote about that. Oh, yes, I remember now."
Yeah,
How powerful is that? As well.
yeah,
So, but there is a slight problem with content on LinkedIn that, if you don't mind, I'm just going to
sure.
address now, which is, however interesting, however valuable, however consistent your content is, and yes, the aim is to get it into the news feed of all these new people that you're introducing from step 3. Ultimately, LinkedIn decides who sees your content. They decide where you're going to appear on their news feed. All right. And you have, within reason, you have limited control over that. Now, there is a place within LinkedIn that you can see one of the dashboards that LinkedIn uses um, to gauge your level of social selling importance, or index, as they call it. And if it's not something that your listeners are aware of, I would suggest I'll give you the details of it, John. Then you can add it on the notes. You may already know what it is.
I'd forgotten about it. Do people still use it?
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of press saying that LinkedIn aren't using it anymore, but LinkedIn officially say that they are. They've re-badged it a little bit, along with all the other algorithms that they're doing. So ultimately, it is still used, but it's a great reference point on your journey. That if you've never done anything like this before, to see where your score is. And for your listeners, it's called the LinkedIn Social Selling Index, and it's free to access. Where your score is today, screenshot it, and then compare it to where it is 3 months after going through this process. You'll be astounded by the change. Even if someone tells you, "Oh, it's not worth the paper it's written on anymore," it is. It's still relevant as well. But it's a great
Uh,
guide to see you're doing the right things. The activity, inviting the right people, engaging with people. These are all the things that LinkedIn want you to do, but that you still can't guarantee that the person that accepted your invite last week from a company that you've always admired and the CEO's accepted your invite, there's no guarantee that that individual is going to see your content. All right. That moves me nicely onto the final phase, phase 5. And this phase has more importance than it did before LinkedIn changed its algorithm. And it's simply this: when an individual like the CEO I just mentioned of the company that you admire and you think you could do great things for accepts your invite, you need to do something, and this is my phrase, and if you hear it, anyone else using it, I'll get some copyright on it, what I call ethical stalking. Okay. When that individual accepts your invitation, what I want you to do is go into their profile to look at where they're posting. Now, going into their profile, firstly, will flag you up, because they will see who's viewed their profile, and you will come up on that radar, on that readout. Then the second thing I want you to do is to look at the post that individual has put out there. And every day, this is phase 5, every day on those types of individuals, i.e. new people in your network that are relevant to getting value from points 1 and 2, I want you to engage with their content by making a comment that isn't just great post and isn't just a thumbs up tick, and this, I want you to like it or clap it or insightful, trying to avoid the laugh, but I want you to make a comment coming from your place of knowledge. All right? If you're agreeing with the post that this CEO's put out there, then say it and say why, and finish with a question. Start a conversation. Okay? But it should be at least 2-3 sentences. This is now what I think, in terms of, if you were going to say what's the most important thing you should be doing on a daily basis, I would say by 1% this gets it.
I'm going to nod so hard my head will fall off here. Commenting is such an underrated and such a powerful approach.
Definitely.
As you say, not a nice post or whatever. That's utterly pointless. But to give an example, there are some people that I wanted to connect with, or there's some people I have a good relationship with, so I comment on their posts. And as you say, I will either disagree and explain politely why and start a debate, and we'll have a constructive conversation. Some of my best relationships on LinkedIn have come from that, and I've been right and they've been wrong, or they've been right and I've been wrong, and I've learned from it and it's been a win and we've built a relationship. Even when I agree, you could say, yeah, I agree, and then you could talk about your experience and tell again one of those stories. And this is underrated, because there are some people that I see still saying, oh, I only get 600-700 views on my posts. What's the point? Okay. I have done comments on people's posts where LinkedIn now shows you how many views your comments
Yes, yeah.
The comment will get 60 to 100,000 views.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great way to get really noticed by that person and by their audience, by their peers. It's such a powerful way. So yeah, absolutely agree, Warren. Commenting is
and
so powerful.
Your head is immediately above the parapet when you comment on someone's. Your LinkedIn aren't deciding. You're deciding who you're going to focus on. And my target for phase 5, step 5, is 10 comments a day. Okay, you could do 20 or 30 interactions, and in interaction is simply a like or a celebrate, or do as many, do 20 or 30 of those, but at least 10 comments that can start a conversation. Now, if you don't agree with what somebody has posted, I would say that there is a place to make a comment as well, as long as it's done in a constructive way from a position of knowledge, where you leave it with an open question at the end. Do you agree? Do you think do you think I've grasped the nettle? Whatever, however you want to phrase it in your words. But I said a while ago, LinkedIn wants LinkedIn to be a social network. They want people to have conversations. This is where it's happening.
I totally agree, Warren. Okay. And I want to hammer home one more point on there. I get so many people that comment on my posts that will write a few things that looks like the start of the conversation. I will reply to that comment because I value comments and I reply, but they've gone. They never come back. So they comment once and disappear. And some of those people will comment every single post, but they never have a conversation. So we're not building a relationship. We're not.
Oh, so powerful. Yeah.
It's pointless. They're missing the whole point. Is it's that relationship that you build. And that happens when we talk to each other.
100%. And another, while I'm thinking of it, John, the other thing that you can do with a post that you see that you really like is you can repost it. Okay. Now, when you repost something on LinkedIn, you have two choices. You can either repost it immediately, or you can repost it with your thoughts, which will allow you to give some narrative. If you repost something immediately, any likes, any comments, that gets attributed to the author, the CEO. If you repost it with your thoughts, any comments, likes, eyes on, gets attributed to you. There's not a right or wrong, but you need to be mindful of that when you repost someone's content. Either way, they'll be thankful, because most people don't realize the nuance, but there is a nuance. One general pointer as well about content, about whether you're creating content, whether you're writing a comment as well. This might seem like, what's what I'm looking for, common sense, but back in that first job I had in B2B sales back in the 80s, my first mentor said to me when I was going out to meet clients, well, okay, before you know somebody, never discuss religion, politics, and you threw the third in because we used to like football, or football, because obviously in the UK it's very tribal. And I think in today's landscape, I'm not going to get into the details, but just be very mindful of things that you post, that your views may have an extreme impact on someone else's. And I don't think it's necessary to share those types of views with people that you don't know. As I say, it's common sense, but I just want to mention that as well. I think it's quite important where if you're serious about doing this. So they're the 5 steps, John. So I'll recap them if I may. Step 1, your value proposition. What ROI are you going to deliver for your perceived next client? Number 2, where you've done it. Number 3, you're no longer the best kept secret. You're going to grow your network with the right people who are going to get most value from steps 1 and 2. On a daily basis, invite 20 to 25 people every day. You are limited, maximize it. Step 4, content. Quality overrides quantity. Keep it consistent, keep it regular, and throw in some personal stuff as well if you want to. And there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's not just about typing experiences. As we've mentioned, podcasts, webinars, so many different ways of creating content. And the 5th, and for me really important, is having at least 10 interactions with your new network every day. People that join your network that you've invited in, comment on their content. And that's the 5 steps.
Thank you very much for sharing them, Warren. If I summarise that up, that would be what I would describe, if we think in terms of the consultancy and the marketing, as your inbound marketing. You're trying to get leads to come to you.
Yes.
So is that where you suggest people focus the majority of their time?
Yes. If you're doing this, it's a bit like going to the gym. You've got to build it into your routine. Now, if I stood up now, you'd see that I don't go to the gym. Okay, but I'm told that people that do go, you don't see results straight away. Okay, but
That's
other
true.
things start happening as a result of going. Not only does your body look amazing, you start to be healthier. You start to sleep better. Yeah, and if you start doing this on a daily basis, okay, other things start happening. You're not going to stop the worldwide global organizations selling you their services of they can grow a great website, they can grow a great mobile app, they can do great offshore, whatever it might be, and they've got, some of their services are great and offer great value. You're still going to get them, but what you're going to start see happening is people, you don't know who they are, and a lot of the time they're what we call lurkers. They never comment, they never say like on any of your content, but they're looking for the sidelines. And you'll get an approach along the lines of, could we set up a virtual coffee? There's something I want to talk to you about. That is, in 2025, that is your CV submission. Having the virtual coffee, meeting them in person for a coffee, that in 2025 is your first round interview. And I said at the beginning of this chat, you don't lead with your CV. It's after those interactions, after you've made yourself known to these people, that they may ask, because HR needs a CV, can you send us your CV? So we've got it. You're going in to a company as a solution to a problem, not a drain on a salary budget. It's a far more powerful way to go into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned the CV / resume, depending on which nationality you are. We didn't talk about the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
Do you think that should mirror your CV, be highly tailored for this message?
Okay. There is a nuance. There was a slight caveat with your LinkedIn profile in that, broadly speaking, when LinkedIn came out in the early 2000s, It was your online CV. My thought process is it's now your landing page, your website, which happens to detail what you've done chronologically. But the key things for me are your banner, and your banner has to have your elevator pitch within it. It should have a call to action, a CTA in marketing parlance, okay, how they can contact you, Calendly, website, and social proof. Now, you would have had recommendations, I'm sure, dozens of them, and you can pick out the most powerful sentences or group of words and throw that into your banner. Okay, because the first thing someone's going to see when they open up your profile, and it's the same with a CV, you have 6 seconds to get somebody to want to stay. And if they see that straight away, boom. But if you're working, you've got to be a bit more tactful in how you word that. And there are tactics you can use that will embrace what you're doing at the moment, while at the same time sharing the outcomes of what you do for your company as well. There's other little things like LinkedIn have created some space next to your name to deliver your pronouns. Now, I don't think, for me personally, that's relevant. I've used that space to populate it with my X handle, which is the CTO recruiter. People might want to put in there, if they feel the same way as me, I'm not sure how many characters you've got. I think it's something like 50 characters. You could put something in there that's relevant because it's searchable, it's indexable on Google as well in there. Your elevator pitch should be what goes below your name. It shouldn't be CTO, transformational, black belt in black Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whatever it might be. It should be your elevator pitch, worded again tactfully if you're working. That should be below there. And your about you section should be like it would be if it was your website. All about the client, all about outcome, what they will get if they were to engage you. And again, you need to be a bit more tactful if you're populating that, if you're working at the moment. Featured items across the back. If you're able to create something called a lead magnet, which is probably not for this podcast, but that's where you would put that, where people can get free stuff based on your knowledge, which costs you nothing to create, but you can provide it at the top of your profile page, along with a recommendation from somebody as well. So your chronological order of where you've worked, outcome, outcome, outcome. That should be all across it. What you've done, what you've delivered, the impact of that as well. And that should also be reflective in how you create your CV and resume also.
Cool, thanks, Warren. I think that's incredibly powerful. And for anyone that is working, I think I would suggest that they think of it, instead of pitching themselves as, your next employee, pitch it as your next podcast guest, your next
brilliant.
speaker at your conference, because then you can pitch all the same outcomes, all the same benefits, but it's should we say, a boss-friendly
Absolutely.
outcome. And it's benefiting your current company as well, that you're
there you go.
becoming
we're very much reading from the same song sheet, John. To create, I've had people say to me, what will happen then if they say to me, why are you creating all this content? And I said, you need to remind your current business of the kudos they're getting when the market knows that they've got somebody as good as me. Well, you obviously got to be a little bit more, what's what I'm looking for? Not too modest about it, or a bit more modest about it, but where I'm creating this kudos for your business by the content I'm sharing. Not once are you going to say you're looking for a job.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't have the green LinkedIn halo saying open to work on it. You can have it anonymously in the background, but not publicly, obviously, if you're working. Should you have it on if you're not working? Well, that's a podcast for another session, but certainly not if you are working. So yeah, it's a bit of a mind. There are loads of nuances. What I've given you today and your audience today, John, are the basics, but there's enough there for somebody who's serious and want to. I won't say give it a go, because you've got to play full out. You can't do this half-heartedly. You've got to commit to doing it, because it's a paradigm shift to what you're used to. But if your listeners, viewers decide that they're going to do it, then there's enough in this podcast for them to run with it and do it.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned lurkers before.
Yes.
And it's a widely quoted stat on LinkedIn that 90% of people are lurking, 10% of people are active, and 1% of people create content. I bet that those stats will apply to this as well.
Yeah.
That 90% of people are just sending out their CV and hoping.
Yes.
10% of people will do some of this.
Yes.
And 1% of people will follow through, even if it's just the basics, but if they just consistently do it, a little bit, 10, 15 minutes every day, they will be in the top 1%. That's giving you a far better chance than anything else.
Oh, most definitely. And John, without wishing to blow my own trumpet, because I'm a humble man, as you know, but if somebody goes to my LinkedIn profile, down the bottom, I've got something like 70 odd recommendations. And the vast majority of those recommendations are from CTOs who I've never placed. So I've never commercially found them a job, but I've coached them. They've found jobs through the techniques that I've coached them on. So if you want to see, proof of the pudding, and you're deciding, well, I'm not sure if this is going to work for me, take a look there. And if you want to reach out to any of those people and you're not networked with them, let me know, and I'm sure they'll be happy to have a chat and to give them their views from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Cool. And I would add to that in that the job I took in 2023 came from me posting on LinkedIn, me being active.
There you go.
The company reached out to me from that. And that was when I was just dabbling. I wasn't really taking it seriously.
I hear that so much, John. Yeah, I hear that so much, what you just said. Well, you weren't doing it full on. You just did and you got a job off the back of it. That's just how powerful it is as well. So awesome.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you very much for your time today, Warren, and explaining the 5 steps. It's been awesome. And as we said, I think anyone that follows through will put themselves in the top 1%. Anyone that wants a bit more help or wants a bit more hand-holding or wants to reach out with you to look for the next CTO role or to hire the next CTO, how should they best get in touch with you?
If somebody's not already networked with me on LinkedIn, and they're working at the moment as a CTO and they want me to help them tailor the 5 steps to their own circumstances, I can work with them on a one-to-one basis and coach them. I would suggest the first step would be to invite me into their network with a little note, okay? Or they can email me. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, my email details will be on there. If there's a company out there who are looking to retain me for my recruitment services, I would suggest the same route. If they can either email me or message me on LinkedIn. If they're not networked with me, then please send me an invite. But they tend to be the most efficient ways of reaching me.
If anyone that's interested, check out the show notes and get in touch with Warren.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much for your time, Warren, today. I think that's a gold mine for anyone that's looking for their next goal.
Thanks for having me, John.
Right. Thanks, Warren.